Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the show. As usual, we're going to start right out with the goods, and we're not going to, do YouTube crap algorithms to promote our video and, make people think we got the goods and then lead them on and not actually deliver on the patents and the technologies and the real names of the scientists and the actionable intelligence where people can actually look up stuff and verify, oh, yes, wow, this is real and it does exist. Recently, we've been going over the gamut of what's new in ufology and want to talk about all the key articles that have come out in terms of the technology, the stuff that really gets pushed to the wayside in favor of these headlines that it's aliens and that we don't know what it is and that we're studying it, we need more money to study it and all this stuff. And then this whole argument over drone theory, like drone swarms and balloons, because apparently there's a whole group of people that are arguing within ufology that all these things predate technology, and all these sightings have happened that predate technologies that could really explain them. But the reality is that paper making can be traced to China, in a couple hundred BC, and fire even earlier than that. And if you combine the two, you can make the paper sky lantern. It doesn't take much thought and much experiment, for someone with dedicated enough within a lifetime, who knows paper making and fire, could eventually figure out how to make sky lanterns. And those have existed. So theoretically, I mean, I don't know when the first sky lantern is, officially documented, but they go back thousands of years, man. So there could have been these things that people didn't really know about. Only a few people knew about these technologies way back in the day, and coordinated releases and stuff could be mistaken for some interesting stuff. But look, we're talking about modern day stuff that's fooling, modern day sensors, and some of the whole theory behind all this and where it dates back to and kind of comes from. But I had started out with this, and there's a link to this patent in the description. And there's this patent is by a guy named Kevin Kremeyer. Really interesting history on this guy if you look him up. And he's involved with this Lake Marabou research stuff that we've talked about in past. But there's a lot of interesting other research that he cites in the bibliographies, which, a lot of it was related to some classified stuff that was going on back during that time period. So which is quite interesting for historical purposes, because it just shows like how this is all documented in there in the literature. It's just not talked about, not published, not well known about, and it's essentially shadow banned or banned from. I talk about how during World War II and the Manhattan Project, they had a whole list of key words that were banned from the vocabulary. You couldn't even mention it in mainstream news articles or newspapers and stuff. And I'm sure they have algorithms that pick up on that kind of stuff too. So if you're talking about certain things, it just... And then people aren't really super interested in this stuff because they want to hear aliens and they want to hear that stuff. Well, not everyone. There's people that really want to hear the physics, and we're going to get into that right now for those people, and ignore the drama and the chaos of the deniers and the believers. And we're just going to get into hard evidence. Really interesting stuff, because I talk about Project Blue Book, this whole U.S. Air Force study that happened into UFOs, and some of their conclusions, and then when it ended, and then some of the interesting things that happened right after they ended Project Blue Book. And it seems like an era of thought existed during this time period. We had Project Sign in 1947, and then Project Grudge a year later, 1948. Right around the time of Roswell, and then Project Blue Book was actually started in 1952, and that's when it's interesting that we have this new look on Project Blue Book. I always like to mention it and talk to newcomers who are not sure about this, but there's this whole issue of the Pentagon memorandum that comes up in any discussion of Project Blue Book, any deep detailed discussion, because apparently there was a second other Project Blue Book which handled these metals, and it was run by Battelle director Howard C. Cross at the time. And there are some papers that date back to 1949, which actually predate Project Blue Book here. 1949, second progress report on metals for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Battelle did the study. They're 45 minutes away from Dayton, Ohio, and over there in Columbus. And I always talk about Dayton, Ohio as being, this little old town in Ohio where Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is. And that was where the head of the Air Force was at the time. And that's where the Roswell debris went after it left Fort Worth. It was flown from Roswell Army Airfield to Fort Worth, Texas. And from Fort Worth, Texas, the Roswell debris was flown on to Material Command, which is at Wright-Patterson still to this day. U.S. Air Force Institute of Technology is over there. NASIC, the National Aerospace Intelligence Center, is over there. So lots of real life aerospace intelligence goes on there. And I want to talk about some of that and what happened after, Project Blue Book ended in 1969 with this. Essentially, I think they had this conclusion on the metallurgy side that they would never be. They were decades away from ever hoping to be able to replicate the technology that they were witnessing or even understanding it or beginning to understand how it worked, and that they would have to bury a lot of it to keep the secrecy, and maybe bring little bits and pieces out here and there through very small secret projects, which I've gone through and talked about a little bit of them and what I think was learned from each of those. And they involve individual scientists, such as, one of the guys, we really got to interview him and ask him in detail about this, but Daniel Sheckman, who discovered quasi-crystals, did his postdoc at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So I'm curious to know if he was exposed to anything or anyone that had these ideas that influenced them and who those people might have been, because that's going to be key research that's going to lead us back to these old school original UAP studies where this file goes deep into the government. They've recovered stuff. They've obviously kept it covered up for technological and superiority reasons. ITAR, alien protocols is called the Foreign Technology Desk or Alien Technology Desk. There's the Alien Property Custodian was a real thing. If you look up type in Alien Property Custodian, I'm not making this up. This was a real office of the government, and it dealt with these types of any kind of foreign artifacts or technology that belonged to a foreign entity was seized by this office of the Alien Property Custodian. I mean, we got to believe that the Vatican and the Roman Catholic Church, the Roman Empire, which ruled for thousands of years, all of Europe, to think that they didn't recover artifacts or holy relics from time to time that didn't fit with the official scriptures. The whole Muslim religion is based upon a black rock that fell from the sky that had magic powers, and it's what they all pray to in that circle in Mecca. There's a lot of interesting context that we can get. People are big fans of Ancient Aliens and these reinterpretations of our natural history. I don't take these things as solid fact, but I love the what ifs of all this and that kind of stuff. But again, it's speculation. It's not really actionable intelligence. If these technologies exist, like balloons, will be able to build them and prove them and show people, hey, this is how you do it, and this is how you create this effect that you're seeing in the sky. And whether it's balloons that are being, laser controlled. So this is a whole technology that they could take control of aircraft or other flying objects with lasers, as I did mention in the description, and show some links to this technology about. Um, Imagine what they could do with blimps and balloons if they had this type of uh, laser plasma induced technology where they could, basically pump these plasmas on the surfaces of the craft to propel them through the sky. And what that would do, ground based, or what have you. I just, it really, it makes me think. It makes me really speculate on that. And man, we got to get Styropyro or some of these other nerd channels that work with lasers. I know he's done research on a lot of stuff that I've talked about, real core science stuff that he's done in the past. We've covered some of that on this channel before. But Styropyro, great dude. If he could like show how to use these lasers to take control of a balloon and fly it around a field, fly it, 300 yards one way and then fly it in a square or a triangle. If he could do that with some lasers and show people how to do that, and see how fast he can get a balloon going by pumping it remotely with a laser, and that would be pretty cool. I would love to see that and get that and help him out with where he can find, some of the patents and the physics of how to do that. I have a whole book on how to do that by Dr. Lake Marabou. And that book was sold originally, and now you can't find a copy of it anywhere except for like 10 grand on they literally went and bought out all the copies of this book. And the guy, we've contacted him for interviews, and he can't even talk until 2027 about any of the technology that is in these patents or that he worked on. And I'm sure, Kevin Kramer won't even respond to emails, but I'm sure he's, pretty much in the same boat. He's making so much money working for the Defense Department on these types of technologies that he's got no interest in talking to Jeremy, who's his name, from UFO channel. What? Yeah. So again, this is what I talk about with ufology, and that the real technologies and the real information is locked up inside of these private corporations. And it's not going to be readily accessible for a number of decades later. And then we'll look back, and by then people will be distracted and not onto something else. And a lot of this is like, it's like book learning. So it's like boring educational stuff. So not really everyone's interested in digging that deep and really getting to understand. But Blue Book again ended in 1969. They kind of gave up that at that point, and then they started Project Outgrowth. And just the name of Project Outgrowth itself is just a marker within within that community to just where they realized they were at that point. I believe, Project Outgrowth was this: how do we grow out of these old ways of thinking, and how do we grow into this new stage? So that's what I believe the whole name behind it was. And it's super interesting. He talks about this. The concept of laser propulsion was conceived in 1969, right at the end of Project Blue Book, at the Air Force Rocket Propulsion Laboratory by a Dr. Robert Geisler. And during 1970, under the direction of Donald M. Ross, a group of 28 scientists and engineers at Air Force Research Propulsion Labs conducted Project Outgrowth, which was a systematic study of the Geisler laser propulsion concept and numerous other advanced propulsion concepts. Under the editorship of Franklin B. Mead, the findings of Project Outgrowth were published in June 1972, nearly simultaneously in May 1972. The most cited laser propulsion paper ever in the history of in the literature. It was called Propulsion to Orbit of Ground-Based Lasers, and it was by a guy named Arthur Kantrowitz. Arthur Kantrowitz, interesting fellow, Columbia University, the fields of physics and engineering. He had a number of patents that span quite an interesting range. In fact, I think that he was one of the guys responsible for this propulsion labs research that led to the realization that ramjet or scramjet, any type of nozzle based propulsion, system was not suitable for hypersonic. That was like the conclusion. He came up with this whole thing in it called it's called the Kantrowitz limit. I think it's called the Kantrowitz limit. It talks about in here, yeah, the Kantrowitz limit. Okay, so the Kantrowitz limit, he came up with this, derived it, showed the formulas for it and everything, and explained why this is the case. That normal shock with the supersonic tubing and the conventional engines where they had these jet engines with this intake and exhaust, there was a maximum velocity that you could actually enter this without ripping it all apart, and that's kind of what he figured out. And that's kind of when they made this realization that hey, flying saucers got to be using something else. Whatever is going to be the next generation in warfare technology is clearly not going to use jet engines or these forcing things into a nozzle and through a tube and through a bunch of fan blades and moving parts and then burning it up at the end with afterburners and all the technologies of the past. That whatever replaces this and gets us into hypersonic Mach 10 plus speeds is going to be something that exists on the surface of the craft itself. And that's probably when they gave up on that idea, early 1970s. Again, some really interesting laser research and stuff came out of that, and is in the literature there from Project Outgrowth. But it's interesting that they didn't get to it took 15 years until 1984. Rensselaer Polytech, type in Lake Marabo history. I think you'll be able to find it, but it might be in the history on Lake Marabou's Wikipedia page. But in the history of Rensselaer Polytech, they had this whole conference on hey, we're gonna have a talk and have a debate and some ideas come forward about new types of propulsion. And supposedly that's when Lake Marabou was like, oh, what if we use lasers and did this? And then they funded his research and he became this new outgrowth project. But I don't know, it's interesting that those projects came out of Project Outgrowth a decade and a half earlier, but then they kind of buried those studies and buried that research and went with some new stuff. And I'm not sure what the different, I got to get more into the technical differences. So I really need to interview these guys and talk to some of them. If any of the guys from the previous outgrowth research are still around, I have to go and track them down a lot. I don't know how many of them are left these days. But I don't think any. That was so long ago. But I know that some of these guys are still around. And it would be interesting to get the technical differences between Project Outgrowth and what happened with Rensselaer Polytech, what bloomed out of there with the Star Wars SDI program and their investigations into directed energy and laser weapons technologies and using them for all this the air spikes. And let's find the here, this is interesting. It talks about adversary drones, all these people talking about, oh, this was before these sightings of these things with the cube with the sphere inside. It happened before 1960. That was one of Jeremy Corbell's big claims, that, he had debunked the debunkers and saying that, oh, there's no way this thing appeared before, 1960. With this cube, with the sphere inside the cube inside the sphere. And yet we have the patents on these balloons, and they go back to they go back to 1945. They were actually filed in 1945 and granted in 1949. So the CIA or whoever was working on these types of technologies in the mid 1940s before Roswell. See, it says it dates to 1945. Yeah, and that's really interesting stuff. And you know what they do is they're radar repeaters. They're set up to be these radar reflectors that repeat, that grab signals and then repeat them. So if you're got a primitive radar system and you shine it on one of these things, it would bounce some weird signals back on your radar and be able to do weird things to your radar, whatever they program it to do. And as computer technology advanced through the 60s and 70s, I'd say more than whatever these primitive types were, just based on these had to have been just based on low level reflection physics, and there was probably more design to these the cube that's inside and what it was made out of and the material, so they could design that specifically and tune that specifically for whatever type of radar is being used. But you combine some of this technology with, some of this technology, and boom, you got some radar reflecting DRFM, which is direct frequency recording memory. So it records the signal and stores it to a digital memory, and then can repeat it or do weird things to that signal as it's projected back. So if it's a radar signal and your return signal is giving you information about geolocation, you could spoof that return signal to give it geolocation data that is whatever you want. It could see 5 aircraft, or it could see the aircraft here instead of there, based on what you want to do with that signal's intelligence and the return and the return signals on that kind of stuff. So it's interesting physics if you really want to get into the physics of how that's done. There are trying to think of a lot of that stuff's not really, there's not a lot of it in the mainstream literature. You can't find studies on it or the names of the people that did it, and they won't, their work won't be in the mainstream studies. So I'm not even going to get into that. But again, it's research that's been done. It's intelligence that already exists out there and has been out there for decades. And again, this is the stuff that they will not talk about. They do not invite me on, to Fox News because of this. They want hype men like Jeremy Corbell to come on there and talk about element 115 and other physics that's not real and doesn't lead to actual scientists or programs or research or directors or any of that stuff, as the research that we do on this channel is about, is breaking this down, digging through these contracts, digging through these scientists and the history, and vetting that where it exists, and then connecting dots behind the scenes to other researchers and scientists that might have been overlooked by some of the other researchers or groups out there. So again, drone swarms, there's lots of evidence that some of these things might have been drone swarms filled through bokeh producing apertures, and stuff like that. So that's the stuff that makes it into the mainstream. That's the stuff that is getting put before Congress by the counterintelligence agencies that are sort of in charge, in my opinion, of the current UFO narrative, and breaking, phasing out the real Area 51 employees who are sharing, actionable intelligence about what these things that are being shown in the mainstream might be. And then for us showing that, we're getting labeled as, the debunkers of the community and getting outcast by, the believers and the people that want disclosure and all this stuff because they're like, oh, these guys are bad, and you're fighting people that are on our team, and these people aren't on your team. They're, not everyone's on our team. And what is our team? My team's about getting actionable scientific intelligence out of this black hole of a government, and finding, real physics experiments that we can perform or reproduce in a laboratory, or rebuild, maybe get some of our tax dollars that went into this research back by reverse engineering it back from what the government already did. And that's what I kind of believe in on this channel as how we're going to move forward and get the actual disclosure, because I've lost hope that we're going to get disclosure, or that the government's going to come out and reveal what these things actually are, because the information is that they don't know fully, and what they do know is so classified and so sensitive and protected that they really don't want to people to know about this too deep about getting in, to people. They don't want people getting too deep into the physics of this, for sure. That's for sure. I'm gonna start learning about some things and some theories and some technologies that may or may not have gone somewhere already. And there's been lots of balloons, and you can mix that technology with that laser projection technology. You can move some balloons around using ground-based lasers and stuff, and that might explain some interesting things. And I'd love to see some experiments with it and see how fast we can move balloons around and whatnot. Really interesting, these laser-supported air spikes in hypersonic flow. Again, these technologies are the key. This is the real deal. This is what should be getting out there and doesn't. And I continue to put more pieces of this puzzle together and get more of these technologies out there. And the goal is to try to show, I want to show like what's been tried, what I think didn't work, what I think does work, and what I think needs to be worked on in the future. And the real future of this, because there's lots of money to be made for the right people, and I want to be part of that, because I don't want to, I need a house and I'm broke, and this field hasn't brought me enough of that, and I think it's worth all that and more. And I'm going to figure this out and and pull this together. I'm committed. I'm inspired by the researchers of the past and how far they've gotten, and I think that we can get the furthest now. We live in the most amazing time period for all this right now, and I thank God for the position that I've been put into, have the contacts and the intelligence that I have, and have become this beacon of light and hope for so many in the field that watch these stuff from behind the scenes and are like, God damn, is there anyone out there that actually knows or has a clue what the hell is going on? And I'm glad that those people have found a home here, and found like-minded people who are really interested in the science and just getting at the core physics of the stuff, and not the speculation and the wonder and the awe and the weaponization of your the monetization of your gullibility, like these other scam artists out there have done. But yes, let's talk more about these scientists and more about this stuff at a later date. I just wanted to do a quick stream and talk about that. And now I'm going to open it up to behind the scenes hangout session with my just friends only. And they specialize in illusion. This whole thing's been about illusions. And I'm not saying that all UFOs are drone swarms and balloons that are being propelled by lasers and these other, DRFM and Nemesis and Project Nemesis and Project Palladium technologies, or any of this stuff. I'm, I'm just saying that the ones that are being presented to the public right now and shown as the evidence are the fake stuff, and it's on purpose so that they can use it to get the funding. But if there's not going to be any kind of real actionable intelligence that gets leaked or comes out of it, I guarantee if they have real alien stuff that they don't know what it is, it's well hidden away for other reasons, and that what they come out with is only what they have to come out with. I don't know. It's really crazy. Oh, so I'm fake. I'm the fakest, dude. Definitely. Come on and tell me how fake I am. Here's the StreamYard link. Join. And let's do it. Yeah, man. The gaslighting has to stop. How about all these people saying that, disclosure is imminent and that they're going to come out? I had where the hell is it? The Hill article. How about this one? The Pentagon, well, this is the low level gaslighting, is that the Pentagon should release all these UFO videos. This is all going to be the crap again. They're going to release a bunch of crap and it's going to be debunked, and they're going to be like, well, this is the nonsense and this is what these people are into, and that's why we created an office to identify these things, and we did identify all of these things, and there's nothing anomalous out there flying that's in any way weird. And it's probably just drone swarms and balloons. Never mind the hypersonic, drones and hypersonic balloons and hypersonic, missiles and all the other, crazy technologies that are documented that we've been researching for decades and decades and pouring untold trillions of dollars into. I mean, was it like 20 trillion missing from the Pentagon budget, just unaccounted for in the last 20, 25 years or so? Since that infamous date not so long ago, 21 years ago, on September 10th, 2001, when Donald Rumsfeld announced that, there was $2.3 trillion missing from the Pentagon budget. And then the office and all the people that were responsible for tracking down that money perished in the attacks that happened in that direct wing of the Pentagon the very next day. Very interesting. But I won't get into speculation and crazy conspiracy theories because you know how YouTube feels about that. So we're going to end this right here, right now. Remember, nothing's a conspiracy. Believe your government. They would never lie to you. They're always telling the truth. The people in the mainstream media and in ufology have your best interests at heart, and they're really just trying to help us all get at the truth, right? And they've done so much to really get that truth and the real information out into a spotlight in front of so many people that it's so great. And we should just adore them and be so grateful for them and worship them and kiss their feet at every point. Just remember that. All of ufology. It's double plus good. Thank you all. Thank you all for watching. Have a great, great evening, and look forward to seeing you in the after party.